For the folks just joining, please don't forget to put your name into the notes. I've whacked the link into the chat. Being 3 past the hour, I reckon we can kick off. First on the agenda today is Brandon, who's going to be talking about SBOM best practices.
Awesome. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. So yeah, a couple of us, to be more specific, myself, another colleague of mine, Meda, as well as Ilka from Sonatype, we've been kind of chatting about SBOMs and kind of like the package management ecosystem and kind of thinking and figuring out, what are the best practices for SBOMs. And so we've written something up initially. Obviously, a very heavily Java influenced since we're talking about like Maven Central and things like that as an example. But tried our best to incorporate, the other aspects of other package ecosystems. So we think that it would make sense to bring this to this OpenSSF community. And the hope is open to ideas, but I think our hope is to be able to say as a community, as a working group, that we've gotten together and said like these are best practices for SBOMs, and that we should kind of either maybe publish a white paper or provide some OpenSSF recommendations. So I pasted the link to the document in the notes.
Do you want me to share my screen, or would you like to do it? So you can do a quick walkthrough?
Let me try and figure out. 1 second. Too many windows open. I think it's this one. All right. Do you see a document? Awesome. Let me hide this. Cool. Yeah. So really short document, maybe a page or two. But really it's just introducing SBOMs. I think we want to focus on very specifically. I know like SBOMs has multiple users and it's very overloaded depending on the use case you're talking about. So for this particular document, we're saying we're going to just scope it down for vulnerability analysis. So the questions that we want to answer is, when does SBOM make sense in an open source context? When you're packaging applications and things like that, and then when you have to generate SBOMs, how should you do it? What are the best practices that you should do? So we've tried to kind of make this as generic as possible. So, having a fully resolved dependency tree when you're generating SBOMs will result in a more complete SBOM and more accurate SBOM. Whenever you can, within your language ecosystem, you should pin dependencies and use the information to generate SBOMs. And for times where you're utilizing code or artifacts from other ecosystems and you're not sure what they are, you should also include them as known unknowns within your SBOM. And yeah, so the and kind of just to wrap up, just like responsibility of SBOMs should really be the responsibility of whoever is uploading the package or uploading the binary or the library. But we see that as being a space for package managers to kind of facilitate this process by kind of providing automation, as well as to be able to provide the tooling so that the open source authors can easily generate SBOMs.
I'll call myself to the floor. Yeah, I was sort of curious. So this, if I'm understanding you correctly, is addressed to package maintainers or authors, rather than like maintainers of the repositories per se.
I think it's both. I think it ends up being a responsibility of the owner of the application or package, because they know it best and therefore they can speak to the accuracy and completeness of an SBOM. But I think we've talked about it somewhere in this document. I can't remember exactly where. But we say that in the meantime, package managers can help, and that will provide value. And basically, it could be a scenario where package managers like run a tool on behalf of the owner to say like, we've generated SBOM based on what the package that you have uploaded. If you want, you can hit like a approve button. If not, it will say like, this was automatically generated, and then we can have additional flag to be like, the owner also did approval to say that the SBOM was good.
Okay, I'll have to think about what I think. But before I do that, I'm gonna pass it to Sebastian.
I think some of this is cool. I agree with the who's responsible for SBOM's contents, that reads right to me. I'm a little confused on because you hear stuff about this all the time, and I'm always a little bit uncertain about what people mean precisely. I'm not sure what you mean by fully resolving the dependency graph in this context. So are we talking? We're talking about build dependencies. We're talking about runtime dependencies. What are we? So the reason I'm uncertain about runtime dependency resolution being critical to like SBOM generation is that, even if you do a very thorough analysis of all the versions that are currently available, your SBOM is going to be used by people who are then going to like pull newer versions of some of the dependencies essentially.
Yeah.
So what are we expecting to get there? Like, how am I misunderstanding it?
So in this for this part that we wrote about for the resolve dependency graph, we were thinking more of it from the build type dependencies. And more specifically, when we're thinking about it like Java, you can specify, I'm using this library, I can specify a range, but it's not really resolved. So in that sense, like npm, basically you wanna do the resolution and then generate the SBOM instead of trying to generate SBOM from like the specification of the range values and then building the artifact later. Does that make sense? But I agree, like the runtime stuff is totally different beast. And that I think that's going to be something separate that we want to handle, and maybe we should be more specific with this, and maybe explicitly disclose that that's not something that we're looking at. Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely, people who push packages, any open source, need to be responsible and should be given the tools and follow, some guidance. But much like Jacques was saying, it's kind of like people who actually use the libraries and packages, they assume trust in the package managers that basically put them on the shelf. It's like a retail store. You go buy a packaged product off the shelf, you trust, and when you have a problem with the product, you go to the retailer, you go to Walmart or Target or whoever it is, and you hope that they vet and their suppliers and supply chain and all those things. But I think, and I guess I'd close by asking how you would see how this would fit with early efforts that have been disclosed in other working group meetings, where GitHub is working to create like a security build profile, where they're going to basically require package submitters to basically say, build with one of these approved build profiles for this package manager as a target. And then that should automatically do the attestations and the builds and the provenance and hopefully package it in a nice SBOM and do the signage and hashing and everything like that centrally at the point of submission to the repository. How does this fit into that cycle, basically?
Yeah, I think the granularity of provenance, and provenance is again like one of those topics where it's like that goes all the way down, right? I think that my view on it is that if we have a strong enough confidence that this process is robust and that we can generate SBOMs and we can generate attestations that are reflective of the source material, then I think that's fine, right? And then we get to a place where we are able to able to verify that and trust the SBOM independently of the package owner.
Yeah, just to follow up, and I apologize if other people are waiting in the queue, but it's about the trust. So
yeah, exactly.
we already don't inherently trust the package developer who might actually have bad code. So why should we trust them to produce a good SBOM and tell them and be honest and truthful? And also, wouldn't in terms of standardized tooling, people can choose any tooling they want. They can even manually produce an SBOM. So it seems to me having something that's automated and something with a consistent set of tools like we set up for Alpha or Omega or whatever it might be. We have a tool chain that we use that we know that everything's consistently produced and comparable. And it's not just ad hoc. Your developer picked this tool and you picked that tool, or I manually made my SBOM. It's infusing the trust by consistency of tooling.
Yeah, so I guess I want to kind of like come back to maybe how the question of like how should we collaborate on this, because I think there definitely are good ideas and good perspectives that we should incorporate in the document. I guess that's a question for Jack, since you're the chair of one of the working groups here. Yeah, thoughts on that, I guess.
I guess I would ask a sort of a follow-up question to Matt. From what I hear, it sounds a bit like you're proposing one of two things. One would be there's sort of an agreed tool set that folks use, the package, I beg your pardon, the repository maintainers use to publish SBOMs, versus there is a central service that repository maintainers can use.
Well, I'm just noting the fact that it's been discussed. I thought even at this work group, maybe in the other time slot, but where their GitHub was saying they're working with NPM as kind of like a case study or a first proof of concept, where they're going to be working to create security build profiles where packages are submitted through GitHub, right? So, so I assume that GitHub is going to propose a tool chain that they're using through a set of actions or whatever that are approved. But it would be good for us to endorse non-GitHub action tool chains, that provides our tooling as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. That I think answers what I was asking. Were there any other questions or comments that folks wanted to bring up?
Yeah, I want to echo a lot of Matt's points and just say maybe this document should end with more concrete recommendations and even phased recommendations. Where sort of, in my opinion, at least, something like what NPM's proposing, where build artifacts, including corresponding SBOMs, are created in a sort of verifiable way. If you can't do that, then at least build it into your build tool by default. And if you can't do that, maybe here's some guidance for your ecosystem on how to do it manually. But yeah, I think this doc looks great, and I think it's tough to strike the right balance of how concrete to be, but slightly more concrete I think would make it a lot more actionable at the sort of consumer end.
I think you wanted to say, or did I cut off Brandon just then?
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, I think that there are definitely things that we can add on here, and obviously this is what we're coming to community for. So any way that we can collaborate, and try and figure out, at least like from the working group perspective, like what we're calling this, are we targeting this to be like a white paper, a recommendation, just to kind of figure out what the angle is.
Yeah, can I turn that back around at you, Brandon, and ask, were you intending the audience for this to be primarily like the folks in this room, or were you intending it to be individual maintainers? You see what I mean?
It's more intended for the folks in this room, as well as the folks that are not in this room but should be in this room.
Great, yeah. And people slightly removed who maybe aren't working on the repository side, but are working on package managers or so on.
Yeah, or like, people that haven't gotten around to looking at the SBOM story, and then, one day it happens.
I'll just say anecdotally that, I've got 2,000 products in IBM. And if I ask everyone's product release managers to give me an SBOM, they'll use 2,000 different tools with 2,000 different configurations and get 2,000 different incomparable results that are not verifiable. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The proliferation of tools or the disagreement of tools is, I think, a sore point for everybody at the moment. And I think we're all sort of hoping that the state of the art continues to advance. One question I had, I hadn't thought about the question of where or who should run the tool before, but I guess the question would be coming down to, do we expect the repository systems or the package management systems themselves to get into the business of publishing SBOMs? I bring this up because this was a question that was raised in the context of Bundler. Somebody was sort of saying it would be nice to have machine readable output from Bundler, and I immediately became terrified that they were describing what was effectively an SBOM, but a custom format.
I'll say 100%. 100%. I think that's backed up by the work in the OCI registry spec that just got finalized, the version 2 spec. If you produce a container, you're supposed to produce metadata with a signed SBOM that's graphically tied to the artifacts you produce. And it's an artifactory. It's not just containers. So it could be jar files, it could be a library, it could be anything, any granularity of anything you produce, any reusable asset.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if I was designing a package manager today, one thing I'd probably do is piggyback on OCI, just because someone else written the hybrids.
Right, and that goes to picking tooling and things like that, because it's tooling that's compatible with what we're trying to implement in terms of SALSA. So producing evidence that's verifiable and provenance and all those things, right? So yeah.
Cool, thank you. All right, are there any more questions or comments for Brandon? I guess my question for Brandon is, what do you see as the next actions? What would you like for us to do next?
So I think it would be great if folks that want to kind of add on to this document. I'm hoping, I know KubeCon's next week, but I'm hoping within the next couple of weeks or so, we get together, flesh out any other changes that we want to make to the document. And we understand that this is one of many recommendations that we can put out. So I think completeness is not really the focus here. Is more can we move the needle and create some best practices that can put out there. So if folks that want to contribute to this can ping me or just comment on the doc, that would be helpful, and then I can set something up, and then we can dive deeper into this. I think the thought there is probably around mid to end November. The question would be, how do we, as a working group, kind of publish this? I guess that's kind of more of a question from my side. It's what's the medium that we see this being published in?
Thank you. Well, if there are no more comments or questions, the next item on the agenda is from me. You may recall that I've popped up a few times to discuss the idea of a shared help desk in order to help us to scale up, mostly to help scaling up MFA rollout, because as we all know, folks take great delight in losing their phones. And we need to have a robust social engineering resistant process for dealing with that, which is expensive, time consuming, and difficult. And that's been a big choke point on the further rollout of MFA. So I propose this, I beg your pardon, I've presented this a few times. And what I'd like to do now is to get the blessing of the work group to take it to TAC, in order to get the blessing of TAC to take it to governing board, who are the ones who can dish out the millions of dollars. So this is sort of blessing round one. So the way I'm going to phrase this is I'm going to ask folks to raise an objection. If you have an objection and you're positively in favor, to either mark that in the chat or to mark it on the document that you are in favor. And are there any objections? Okay, I see no objections, so I'll mark that. Back. No objections. By the way, Patrick, we can hear you typing. Sounds like a great keyboard. Okay, so there are no objections. That's good. So I will begin the process of moving that forward to TAC. The next question I have is who's going to help move the ball forward? Because I'm going to be away for a month. I'm off to Australia to get hitchified. So I won't be able to go to TAC and pitch it myself. And I was wondering if anyone feels like volunteering, would like to do that. I can find other folks if necessary, but I wanted to make sure that I put it in front of the group first, if anyone wanted to put their hands up. Thank you, Patrick. I'm very excited. Okay, we're all busy. I understand. Okay, I will try to make some arrangements for somebody to pick up while I'm out to present to TAC. Bob, of course, knows that this is coming, so we will make sure to have a plan to get that in front of TAC in a timely fashion with as much support as possible. Also, anything people wanted to raise while we're on the topic?
Yeah, one very quick point, which is I had another proposal for another way we could spend tax money, and I am a lot less far along than Jacques is, yes, but have not forgotten. And actually have an exciting, super quick update there, which is just that. So this was for the OpenSSF being a repository for data about repositories, which would be of use to security researchers. I have actually found someone who has expressed interest in taking this on as a contract. Obviously, I wouldn't necessarily write the contract with this person in mind, but we were worried about finding someone who was, you know, a sufficient like polyglot to feel comfortable trying to implement with a bunch of different repository ecosystems, and so that's the exciting news there. So hopefully a lot more details on that proposal. This would be, we talked about all sorts of things, details about takedowns and the reasons for those takedowns, details about package uploads and the rates and how frequent the versions are, package downloads. PyPI is actually doing a great job here. They make a lot of interesting data available via BigQuery. So there's infinite data about package managers that could be useful and package repositories that could be useful to security researchers. And so our goal is to kind of identify a subset that's pretty feasible to do near term and hopefully expand that out in the sort of medium and long term.
I'm definitely really excited about this project. I think it's important, especially since as I keep raising, when the research comes in and it's comparing multiple ecosystems, there are differences, and it's difficult to generalize between them. So it's useful to have multiple different data sets in play. Thank you for that update, Zach. Matt, did you have a question or comment?
No, just super excited as well. Saw me clapping and stuff. But something that's come on my radar the last couple of months is not just package managers code, but data is equal or more important. Case of ML and model creation. And I think that a lot of the new versions of SBOMs will include formulation, include ML, specifically called, you know, processes and things like that. So I think we probably should put on our radar too, evaluating people who disperse or claim to disperse data models. I think that there are some groups trying to shape up those spaces and be able to rate those services as they come online, to rate the quality of data models, the provenance of the data coming in, et cetera. It would be, you know, put that on the radar, basically, equal to code.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Matt. I've had some discussions. I know Hugging Face is one of these. There are a bunch, but that are attempting to be like, you know, GitHub for ML. And apparently, state of the art there is you just use Git LFS to put huge blobs of data. Pickle is super common as a format. So when you load things into memory, it'll exec arbitrary code. And so all of these supply chain considerations that apply to software repos certainly apply to machine learning model repos as well. I can take an AI to try to reach out to that community specifically, Hugging Face, and see if anyone from there would be interested in joining these calls. Thanks, Jack, for doing that.
Cool. Good point, Matt. Thank you for bringing that up. Also on the agenda, returning to Zach, is a question about the EMEA meeting time, which is this one. And that depending on where you are in Europe, it might not be as friendly as the title makes out. But I'll hand it over to Zach to pick up the discussion.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think UC was saying he's in Eastern European Standard Time, and it's like 8 or 9 p.m. over there right now, which does feel a little bit late for a work meeting. So our other meeting is, let me put it, it's like 4 hours later than this one. That doesn't feel like a huge gap. And so I know this had been earlier and got moved kind of later because we didn't have tons of representation from time zones where that was less workable. But I think, I don't know if this needs a vote or anything formal, or we just want to say someone is going to take an action item to try to doodle a new time for this, the EMEA time. I guess I'm proposing that we try to find a new time for the EMEA friendly meeting. And I will hear objections now. Okay. And then I guess I would ask, if we have one meeting that's about 4 hours from now and one meeting that's a little bit earlier than now, I think that leaves basically US Eastern as one of the only time zones, and that is going to be able to make both of them comfortably, which is, it is what it is with time zones. It's not great. Does anyone see any problems with that, though, other than a lot of folks are only going to be able to make one of those meetings at most?
I think as long as those of us who are living life large on the East Coast of North America can act as sort of interstitial tissue and keep tying the topics together. It is a tricky thing because we do have a pretty broad spread of folks.
Yeah, and then maybe we can just try to encourage more use of Slack and other asynchronous media as well.
And the mailing list for that matter, which doesn't see a lot of traffic, but could. I have no objection to moving. It doesn't look like anybody raised any objection.
Yeah.
Zach,
Cool.
Did you have a particular time in mind that we would move it to?
No, and I think given the number of folks involved, I would be hesitant to try to just pick a time out of a hat. I feel like that's a good way to, completely prevent a whole so maybe the time range would look something like 8 a.m. Eastern up until like noon Eastern. So that like 4 hour window feels like a pretty comfortable time range.
Can I propose you take an action item to, there's sort of two halves, I think. One is to check the existing calendar to avoid collisions if possible.
Yeah.
As a nice to have, because there's a lot of stuff on the calendar these days. But the other one also, can I suggest that you send an email to the mailing list to let folks know that we're doing this, because that'll help catch folks who are out of sync with the times we have now.
Great, I will do that.
Thanks, mate. Okay, we come to the part which I forgot to add. I'm just going to add it now with a little cheaty bit, which is any other business. Is there any other business or questions or discussions that folks would like to raise? It's been pretty good today. We've been nice and wide ranging. Okay, I don't see anybody jumping on a thing, although I saw an interesting note from Matt, which I'll call out, which was that the Cyclone DX machine learning working group is using Hugging Face as our hello world for CDX 1.5. That's quite interesting. I really like seeing the advancement in the state of the art with this stuff. It's cool. That's why I like being in this line of work. If there's no other items, then I can give you back some free time. And you can all enjoy the rest of your day, wherever you may be, or evenings, of course, as the case may be for those who are, in fact, in EMEA. I hope that you all are well, and most of us will be back in 2 weeks or 4 weeks, according to time zones. I may be back in 4 weeks, but we will see. It will depend very much on jet lag. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a great time. Good to see you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jacques.